Alright, so you are one of the very few but brave players who are interested in maining Viktor. Well, you're in good luck, because in today's video I'll teach you everything there is to know about playing and maining Viktor. My name is Kai and I'm a Grandmaster mid laner on the EOS server who loves to create content and help people out with their solo queue journey. Now, if you're interested in my personal coaching, check out the description below and consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. Just like in my other champion guides, we'll start with the champion identity, because fully understanding what type of champion Viktor is necessary before we can even think about playing him properly. So I would recommend, even if you're a Viktor main, that you don't skip this part of the guide and that you fully watch it, as this is the very backbone of this entire guide. Now, when we talk about Viktor's champion identity, we're just establishing Viktor's strengths, weaknesses, and what makes him stand out from other mid laners. First of all, Viktor is a great scaling champion. This means that Viktor becomes stronger the longer the game goes on. In game, this fundamental translates to playing relatively safe in the early stages of the game, so that we can focus on farming and get to our item and ability power spikes consistently at good timings in the game. Number 2, Viktor is a lane bully. Well, at least in a majority of the mid lane matchups. Viktor's Q allows him to deal damage and tank some damage at the same time, which makes him very strong in the early lane phase, as most other mid laners simply can't compete with this ability. Additionally, Viktor's E mechanic allows him to constantly poke enemies from afar, which also makes him a very good lane bully. And this is where Viktor's true strength lies. He's a very good scaling champion who becomes very strong in the late game, but he's typically also a good lane bully, making him good in all the stages of the game. Number 3, while Viktor scales amazingly and is typically a lane bully, he can easily get countered by mobile champions such as assassins like an Akali, or even ganking junglers like a Shaco or Sejuani, because he's so immobile. Viktor has almost no mobility, and on top of that he has very limited self-peel tools. This is arguably the hardest part of maining or playing Viktor. While he is strong in almost all the stages of the game, being immobile makes him very vulnerable to all-ins or ganks if he oversteps once. In game, this translates to learning how to position properly, how to space and tether properly, and how to ward properly as well. Number 4, Viktor is a great champion for teamfighting. This is because he scales so well, he has great AoE damage, has very long range poke, and is great at zoning enemies from objectives. In game, this translates to avoid fighting too much in the 1v1 or 2v2s, and instead look to fight major teamfights for objectives like dragons and barons. Look to sync your item power spikes and summoner spells with these objective timers so that you're always at your strongest in these dragon and baron teamfights. Now in those fights, you look to zone enemies from the dragon or the baron by closing off entrances with your W and constantly poking enemies with your E. If the enemies manage to successfully group and fight your team in an all-out teamfight, look to position behind your front line and deal as much damage per second as possible from your safe backline position. Number 5, Viktor is so good at clearing waves that it's actually something that sets him apart from most other mid laners. If Viktor has some items and his upgraded E ability, he will literally one-shot waves. In game, this translates to using your wave clear to your advantage by constantly shoving out waves and establishing prio for you to pressure the map in the mid game, for example. Also, if enemies look to siege your turrets, you should look to defend those turrets, as you can just clear waves so the enemies can't walk up to siege your turrets. So Viktor's great wave clear allows him to stall out games and skill for free, as oftentimes he can just stop enemies from taking his turrets because he just one-shots all the minion waves. And last but not least, number 6. Viktor's passive is a stacking mechanism that makes him so special. Viktor gets stacks if he kills minions or gets champion kills or assists, and every time he reaches 100 stacks he can upgrade one of his non-ultimate abilities. Now Viktor's upgraded abilities are a lot stronger than his normal abilities, so getting your upgrades as quickly as possible is an absolute must. Now in game, this translates to focusing on farming to consistently get your ability upgrades at good timings. This also means that if Viktor were to get some early assists or kills, he can upgrade his abilities very early in the game, and that gives him the opportunity to snowball really hard and have an insanely strong early and mid game on top of his already strong late game. So your passive really decides how strong you are gonna be in the early and the mid game, because your strength will vary a lot based on when you get your upgrades. So farming as good as possible is your main goal as Viktor, especially in the early stages of the game. Okay guys, so now let's take a look at Viktor's abilities. We're going to start with his passive. His passive is very simple. Viktor, he will get stacks, and if he gets to 100 stacks, he will be able to upgrade one of his non-ultimate abilities, so his Q, W, and E. It's very simple. So you get 100 stacks. You decide which ability you want to upgrade. Let's say it's your E. Okay, now you go back to 0 stacks. Now you work your way up to 100 stacks again. Now you can upgrade your Q or your W. And you do that until you've upgraded all your non-ultimate abilities, so your E, W, and Q. Now, how do we get to 100 stacks in the first place? Again, quite simple. You will get stacks from killing minions, epic monsters, champions, killing them, things like that. Now let's break it down. If you kill a normal minion or just a normal jungle camp, what's a normal jungle camp? Just the raptors or the red buff. All these camps here, they're all normal jungle camps, including the red buff and the blue buff. If you kill all those normal jungle camps, or if you kill a normal minion on the map, you will get 1 stack for your stacking mechanism. You can also get 5 stacks. If you kill a cannon minion or a super minion or an epic monster, you will get 5 stacks. Now, what is an epic monster? I'm talking about a dragon, a normal dragon, or an elder dragon. I'm talking about void grips, a herald, and a baron. Now, void grips are very interesting because if you go to the void grips, they spawn very early in the game. So if you go to the void grips and they spawn early in the game, per void grip that you kill, you get 5 stacks. So they always spawn in 3 void grips, so you can get up to 15 stacks from the void grips. So if your teammates go there, like your jungler decides to take them, you can just move there and see if you can just last hit them, and then you would get 15 stacks from the void grips. Even if you get 1, it's still very, very worth to go there and take it. Because, yeah, stacks in the early game are very significant for Viktor. Also, maybe something that you want to know, while you're killing the void grips, they're also spawn void mites, so the smaller animals. You can't kill, like you can kill them, but you won't get a stack for it. When they introduced void grips, you did get a stack per void mite that you killed, but now they fixed that and I don't think it's going to come back in the future. So you do get 5 stacks from like a cannon minion, super minion, and then also from epic monsters, like from the void grips, but you won't get any stacks from the little void mites, unfortunately. And then last but not least, you will also get 25 stacks if you get a takedown on an enemy champion. What's a takedown? It's either killing an enemy champion or having an assist on an enemy champion. Whether it's a kill or an assist, it doesn't matter, you will get 25 stacks for it. So in theory, if you have like 4 assists or 4 kills or a mix of kills and assists, that's a total of 4, you will have 100 stacks and you will instantly be able to upgrade one of your abilities. Alright, that's it for the passive. Now let's move on to Viktor's Q. Very simple. You throw out an objective to an enemy champion. Not an objective. You throw up a projectile. Yeah, you throw a projectile through an enemy champion. If you throw it, it will deal damage to the enemies. You will gain a shield, and your next auto attack will become empowered. So let's take a look at it. I throw a projectile at the enemy. It deals damage, and I gain a shield. The shield that I gain is AP and AD shield. So it will shield me from both AP and AD damage, which is very important. Now, so I deal damage, I gain a shield, and my next auto attack is empowered. You can see it, my normal auto attacks are like this and deal a lot less damage. My next auto attack is like this and deals a lot of damage. So after doing your Q for a limited amount of time, you will be able to have this empowered auto attack. You can see the timer here. And then if you do it, yeah, you deal extra damage. A little trick with that empowered auto attack is that when you Q, I want you to spam pick right click on this dummy or on your enemy champion in game to make sure that your empowered auto attack goes off very quickly. For example, I could do this, and that's very slow. But if I spam right click on this enemy dummy, this is gonna be what it looks like. So the auto attack goes off very, very quickly because I'm spamming the auto attack while I'm doing the Q. So the auto attack goes off really, really quickly. Now, with that being said, if your Q is upgraded, so if you upgrade your Q, what's going to happen to your Q? It's going to stay the same ability, but the shield that you get from it, so this shield, it will be 60% stronger, so 60% bigger shield. And when you do your Q on an enemy, you will get extra movement speed for like 2.5 seconds. So that's very, very important. The movement speed is a very big part of it. The fact that your shield is bigger is obviously useful when you upgrade your Q, but it's the movement speed that really allows you to kite a lot better. Oh, there's like an Akali jumping onto you. Now your shield will shield you for more damage, but you can also get increased movement speed to just walk away from her dashes. So it's going to help you kite a lot better. Now, as for your W, it's very simple. You're going to throw something on the ground. If people walk into it, they are slowed. And if they stand into it for too long, they are stunned. So let's say this is an enemy champion. I press my W. He stands in here, so he walks into here. He's slowed for like 45% right now. And also, if he stands in that W for 1.5 seconds, he will be stunned, which is very important. Now, enemies will be stunned and knocked down. What does that mean, knocked down? Well, it's actually very simple. the main part about it is that, for example, like an Akali, if you press W and Akali wants to E, well, if she's 1.5 seconds in this W, while she's Eing, she will just be stunned in the middle of doing her E. So people can dash out of it, but if they are 1.5 seconds in the W, they cannot dash out of it. They will just be stunned mid the dash, in the middle of their dash. So that's something that's very, very useful. Now, what also do you need to know about your W? What's very important, if you upgrade your W, it will make your non-ultimate ability, so your Q and your E, slow enemies for 20% for 1 second. Again, this is very useful because once you have your upgraded Q, and then you have your upgraded W and your upgraded E maybe, so your E and your Q will slow, they will slow enemies, but your Q will not only slow them, it will also give you empowered movement speed, right? Because when your Q is upgraded, you get movement speed. So your abilities will slow enemies, and then with your Q, you can just run them down with the extra movement speed. So that's kind of interesting that you both have a slow and a movement speed, which makes you pretty good at running down enemy champions actually. All right, that's it for the W. Now let's move on to the E. So if we do E, very simple. I'm going to throw a laser onto the ground, and everybody who stands in that laser is going to take damage, and they're all going to take the same amount of damage. So I'm going to play some dummies here. So let's say I want to hit all of them. I deal damage to all of them, and I deal the same amount of damage to all of them, which is also very important. The E doesn't really do that much itself, so that's it, right? Maybe an interesting thing about this with this mechanic is that your E has 2 ranges. So if I stand here, the range that you right now see, the circle that you right now see is not your E range. The circle that you right now see is the maximum range of which you can start your E cast. So Viktor doesn't do his E from his body. His E can start from the circle maximum range. So your E can start from here, from here, from here. It starts from this range. So it's very important, if you want to main Viktor, that you, in your mind, understand that this is his range, and the more you play him, the more you're going to get used to it. And then you know that you can just press your E at his maximum range. For example, I right now know, if I want to press my maximum range, I will just E from here, look, and now my E starts here on the ground from the maximum range. This is very important, so that you don't always do this, right? Your E has so much more range, it has all this range. So keep that in mind when you play Viktor and when you do his E. Now, something else about Viktor's E, of course, is if you go into a bush, for example, and you don't know if somebody's in there, your E reveals them. So your E gives you vision in spaces. There doesn't have to be an enemy champion as well, it just reveals space that is not warded. A very good use case for that is very simple. Let's say I want to roam to the bot lane and I'm playing versus a Kali or Fizz, so while I'm roaming, I'm scared that they might be in this bush, so what do? I walk up, I look to E the bush, and now I see there's nobody in there, so I can walk up. Or if I see that there's somebody in there, I can safely walk back to lane. So it is very good to face check bushes that you haven't warded. So that's also very useful. Now, if your E is upgraded, what is it going to do? Very simple. If your E is upgraded, it will just deal damage twice. So this damage, there will be another time that this laser will deal damage. It will like explode, and it will just deal extra damage, both to champions and minions, or like monsters, so you will have a lot of more wave clear, and you will also do a lot of damage to enemies. So that's your upgraded E. That's it for your non-ultimate abilities. Now, if we go to our ultimates, this is where it doesn't become really tricky, but there's quite a lot of like niche things that you want to know about your ultimate, because a lot of people, they feel like very frustrated with Viktor's ultimate. They don't really know how it works. It's very simple. Viktor ultimate, you just unleash a storm on the map. It's a circle on the ground, and everybody who stands in that circle will take damage. So for example, I can do it on this one person here, and now he will take damage here in this storm. But for example, so I'm going to wait until my ult is over here. If I put like multiple people here and I do my ultimate, it's going to hit all of them, and it's going to hit the same amount of damage to all of them. Now, what is very interesting about this is that your ultimate has 2 damage parts. One, the moment that I cast my ultimate, like right now, here, it deals a burst amount of damage. The moment you cast it, it deals burst damage, like instant damage. And then after that, it will deal damage per second. So you're going to see that the moment I launch it onto these guys, they will take a big amount of damage, and then after that, they will take damage per second. So hopefully you saw that they took instant damage, and now they take damage per second. Now, something about Viktor ultimate in terms of controlling it, it's very simple. First of all, Viktor's ultimate will automatically follow targets that it most recently damaged. So look, even if I don't activate my ultimate on top of this guy, but let's say I ulted here, as long as it's going to hit the dummy, it's going to move there automatically. So look, it automatically moves there because it most recently hit it. So that's something that's quite important to know. Now, if you don't want that, let's say there's 2 targets here and you hit your ultimate here and it goes to this champion, you can also make it move towards here, to this champion. How do I do that? It's very simple. When I activate my R and I want it to go to this guy, I just let my mouse be on this guy. So I put my mouse on this guy and now I just press R on top of this guy. So look, I activate my ultimate, use my mouse on this guy, I press R and it automatically goes onto this champion. So I don't have to do anything. So that's very, very important. However, keep in mind that the Viktor ultimate, it is quicker the closer you are to it. So if I'm here and I press R, look how quick I can move it from champion to champion. I can constantly move it. It's relatively quickly actually. So I can constantly move it. However, if I were to like be very far away, look how slow it goes from champion to champion. It's a lot slower. So hopefully you see the difference. If I'm far away from my ultimate, it's a lot slower than when I'm close to it. In game, this relates to, like, for example, many Viktors in a team fight, they wait too long with doing their ultimate. They wait too long for a good angle to do their ultimate, and then they have an issue. Their tanks in their team have already died, and now they do their ultimate, right, to do the damage. They have a good angle, but the tanks have died, so they need to walk away, and now the enemies can just walk out of it because it's very, very slow. So as Viktor, you really want to make sure that you can do your ultimate when you can still walk up. And when can you walk up as Viktor? When your tanks in your team are still alive. So when they're still alive and they want to engage, that's the perfect moment for you to ult, because then you can follow them. And now enemies, look, they cannot really walk from this ultimate if they walk away, because it's super, super fast, because we're close to it. So that's a great tip for the Viktor R as well. Another thing about Viktor, his ultimate, is that it can cancel, or like disrupt, but it's basically the same. It can cancel or disrupt channeling abilities. Now, what's an example of a channeling ability? For example, Katarina ultimate. So, if this is a Katarina, and she wants to do her ultimate on me, if I right now press my R, it will cancel her ultimate, which is actually very interesting. It's very good, and many people don't know it when they play Viktor, so let alone people who play against Viktor, they typically also don't know it. So it's very useful. Another thing that's interesting when you play Viktor is when we go here, just like I told you that your E will reveal vision in the bushes, the same with your ultimate. Your ultimate will also reveal unwarded spots on the map. So typically you don't want to use it for that, of course, but it's just useful to know that it can do that. All right, and then something that's also very interesting is that you can press your Zhonya's. So look, if I press R and I Zhonya's, I can still use my ultimate during my R, which is very interesting. Many people don't know it. It's not that useful because, like I said, if you want to redirect your ultimate, you just have to cast it once on a guy. But if you're in your Zhonya's and it's already casted on the wrong guy, or it follows the wrong guy, I Zhonya's and I just press R onto here and I can still move it, which is just very, very useful in case you are in a game where you are in a situation like this. And then last but not least, I told you that Viktor, his passive, allows you to upgrade his non-ultimate ability, so his Q, his W and his E, but you can also upgrade Viktor's ultimate, not with the stacks, but the moment that you upgraded both his Q, W and E, so the moment you upgraded his non-ultimate abilities, your ultimate will automatically be upgraded as well. Now, what does your ultimate do when it's upgraded, so when it's empowered? It's very simple, it will move faster. So it will move 25% faster when it's upgraded. And it is upgraded when all 3 of your non-ultimate abilities have been upgraded. That's it for Viktor. He has very simple abilities. It's just like a couple of niche things that you need to know about them. But this is it. This is the main gist of Viktor, his abilities. Now, let's move on to the next part of this guide. Now, let's take a look at Viktor's summoner spell setups. You basically always want to go teleport flash. Viktor's super immobile, so you definitely always need flash in your summoner spell setup. And teleport allows you to get a good early lane to make sure you consistently get to your Lost Chapter power spike as early as possible. Additionally, it gives you the opportunity to make teleport plays, but mainly it allows you to side lane properly in the mid game to make sure that you don't fall behind on tempo, because side laning as Viktor is going to be one of his weaknesses. Now, like back in the days, maybe like a season ago or something, you could consider even going Ghost Flash on Viktor, but after multiple nerfs to Ghost, I don't see that as an option anymore. Now, also in theory, you could go Ignite on Viktor, like Ignite Flash, but since you want to scale and focus on farm because it's more consistent than trying to get kills, it doesn't make that much sense. However, in easy matchups, I think you could go it. It's not completely bad, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it, as I think Teleport is a lot better. Another setup that in theory you could go on Viktor is Flash Cleanse, and this one is maybe the most viable one next to Teleport Flash. And you can use Flash Cleanse if you play versus a heavy CC comp. For example, if you play Viktor into something like Twisted Fate Sejuani combo, you could argue to go Cleanse, but personally I would still go Teleport, as it's just so good on Viktor, and since you typically build Zhonya's on Viktor anyway, you don't necessarily need Cleanse that much, maybe only in the early game, so you could take it, but it's not that important. I think Teleport is still better. Now, you could also opt for Flash Barrier or Flash Heal or Flash Exhaust, but I wouldn't consider those because again, Teleport will also make it easier to get through the early lane, and on top of that, it will help navigate the mid and late game a lot better than Heal, Barrier or Exhaust. Alright, so basically the summary is Flash Teleport is the way to go on Viktor, and that's it for the Thunder spell setup. So let's move on to the next part of this guide. Alright guys, let's take a look at Viktor, his rune setups. I'm not going to waste your time, so let's get started with it. So first of all, the first setup is going to be this. This is Viktor, his main setup. Very simple. Viktor is in essence a lane bully. So in order to make sure that he can fulfill his role as a lane bully, we go damage, so Airy and Scorch for the early game damage in the lanes, Mana Flow Band for some mana, Transcendence for some ability haste scaling, and then in the precision tree, we get even more damage, ridiculous amount of damage, by going Cut Down. Now what does Cut Down do? It will give you 8% more damage when you're hitting champions who are above 60% health. So this is great, specifically when you want to like all-in people. This is going to do a lot of damage. And then obviously Legend Haste, it will give you ability haste, and if you stack this with Transcendence, you are going to have a ridiculous amount of ability haste without having to buy it in your build. And it's super useful because Riot made sure that the items right now, AP items, don't give you that much ability haste anymore. They just give you AP anymore. So like a little bit of ability haste. So they nerfed the ability haste in the game, specifically for mages as well. Going double ability haste here kind of solves that issue, and since Cut Down is so broken, it's completely fine to go in the precision tree right now on Viktor. So that is why this is currently the standard setup for Viktor. Then here we typically go the attack speed chart because simply it makes farming easier. And on top of that, it also helps you weave in some auto attacks and some early game traits. Then obviously we go Adaptive Force, and then here you could choose between either flat health or scaling health depending on the matchup. So if I'm playing versus something like a Silas or a Fizz champions who want to like go on to me in the early game, they want to fight me like level 1, 2, 3, 4, like very early levels, I would go flat health because this might save me from dying, and it might be the difference between living and killing them than the other way around. Now, if I'm in matchups where I'm a little bit more chill, like matchups where I'm not gonna where we're not gonna fight constantly level 1, 2, 3, 4, I can very much okay with health scaling. This is gonna make you scale a little bit better towards the mid and late game. Now, you could change the precision tree here as well for another tree, and that could, for example, be Inspiration Tree. Like, what I also like about Inspiration Tree is Cosmic Insight is a very nice rune. It makes sure that if you build the Zhonya's, that you have your Zhonya's more up. It makes sure that your Summoner spells are more up, like your Teleport and your Flash. Now, Viktor is very immobile champion, so having your Flash up as much as possible and your Zhonya's as much as possible is actually amazing. So going Cosmic Insight is really, really great, but the problem is the rest of these runes are currently not in that good of a state. Whereas if you go to this tree, you know for a fact you're going to have a lot of value from these runes. Whereas here, Cosmic Insight is good, very good even, but then the other runes are not that good. Biscuit Delivery, it doesn't give you mana anymore, it only gives you HP, which is not that good for Viktor because in the early game, you typically, due to your range, due to your strong Q ability, you win every lane, or you win almost every lane. And then because of that, you typically don't have HP issues, but you do have mana issues. And since it doesn't give mana anymore, you don't get that much value from it. The only value that you get from this is, and let's read it together, consuming or selling a biscuit permanently increases your max health by 30. So this will help you increase your maximum health, which is very useful on Viktor because you're immobile, and the more HP you have, the tankier you are, the harder you are to kill, so the longer you can live. So I don't think it's that significant, the extra HP you get from Biscuit Delivery. So one, you don't get the mana, and the increase in maximum HP is not that good. So I still think it's not that good of a rune right now. They need to buff it in my opinion. And then the other ones here, I just don't think they're good. Same with here. And then in the top row, yeah, Hextech Flash or Hex Flash. We don't like it, of course, on Viktor. And then I would go with Cashback. Cashback is a scaling option. I think it's completely fine to go this on Viktor. It's not that good of a rune, but it is fine on Viktor because you want to scale anyway. What you could also go is Magical Footwear. This is going to make sure that you can't rush your boots in the early game, but you do get extra, like you get your boots of speed for free and you get some extra movement speed. But On a mage, typically, specifically in higher elo as well, you're going to either play against assassins or mages. In mages, you play versus skill shot matchups, right? Like versus a Syndra. She will constantly throw skill shots at you. In order to dodge them, you need some early movement speed. If you play against an assassin, you need some early movement speed to be able to dodge their all-ins, or like run away from their all-ins, things like that. So then magical footwear is typically not that good, because typically you want to rush boots on a mage. The thing is, currently, in the current state of the game, we are in like the last couple of patches, the boots have been nerfed and the boots are extremely bad right now. You spend so much gold for so little stats that you kind of don't want to rush them anymore. So right now, I would say if there has ever been a patch or a series of patches where you could go magical footwear, I think it's right now, but it's still not one of my favorites. So cashback is going to be my favorite here, or biscuit delivery, but they're both not that good. So it's personal preference to this point. I prefer cashback even over biscuit delivery, but it's not that good. So we are getting cosmic insight without having another good rune here in this setup. That's why I do prefer this setup. Even though I don't have cosmic insight, I do prefer this setup. With that being said, there's also another setup we could go here. We could go into the resolve tree. Very simple. You play versus champions who want to fight you level 1, 2, 3, 4, like very aggressive, like a Silas or a Fizz. You want to shield yourself from their burst damage. So bone plating is going to be a great setup here. In those matchups, I also prefer to go shield bash. What is shield bash going to do? It's basically your Q. Viktor Q throws a projectile at somebody. It deals damage and it shields you, and your next auto attack after throwing the Q will be empowered. It's the same with shield bash. Your next auto attack that you deal after being shielded will be empowered. So as Viktor, you throw your Q on an enemy, now your empowered auto attack will deal even more damage because of shield bash. And you can consistently do your Q and empowered auto attack in these matchups like Silas and Fizz because they are melee range. So that's why I like this a lot in those matchups. It's very lane oriented, it doesn't scale that well, but it does allow you to get like an early lead and stomp them or prevent getting stomped yourself. With that being said, you could also not go for shield bash and you could go for something like revitalize bone plating, and I think revitalize is fine in certain situations. So revitalize, it will give you extra heal and shield power. Now Viktor doesn't have a heal, but he does have a shield on his Q, and I wouldn't say it's that significant to go revitalize, but if you are in a game where you want to go into the resolve tree for bone plating, and let's say you do have a Karma on your team or something, who will have like a lot of heals and shields, I think Revitalize could actually be worth it on Viktor because of your shield and your Q as well. So I would only go this if I want to go into the resolve tree in a certain game because I'm playing versus something like a Silas, and then I might as well take bone plating with Revitalize if I do have a Karma or something like that. If I don't have a Karma, then I would probably go something like Overgrowth if I want to have scaling, or if I say I don't want to have health scaling, I'm gonna go full aggression early lane, I'm gonna go shield bash, but at this point it's personal preference. The main thing here that you should know is that you should go bone plating against these burst champions like a Silas, and then shield bash or overgrowth is personal preference, and then revitalize is more of a niche pick when you have a champion who can heal and shield you a lot, like an Ivern or a Karma. That's it for the Airy Scorch setup. Are there other rune pages? Well, yes. Other rune pages would be Comet. You can go Comet in poke matchups. So, Airy Scorch you use when you can constantly attack your opponent with auto attack, with Qs, with E's. Now, if you play into long range matchups, think of a Valkos, a Ziggs, an Orianna, a Syndra, those type of champions. You're typically just gonna poke them with your long range E, mainly. Sometimes a Q when they overstep, but typically just with an E. If you just want to poke them with your E, Comet is gonna be your best keystone. And then again, it's just the same. We go Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, and Scorch. You could go Gathering Storm in these matchups, because typically mage matchups is going to be very difficult to solo kill a good Syndra in the 1v1 as Viktor. So then Comet is going to help you like poke them a little bit in the early game, but Gathering Storm is going to help you scale. Now, if you want some extra damage, you could go Scorch, for sure, but I actually prefer Gathering Storm in these matchups. So that's what I prefer, but you could go Scorch. But I'm going to put it on Gathering Storm here, because that's what I prefer. And then again, the secondary runes are going to be the same. This in general is going to be the best, but if you really want Cosmic Insight, you could go something like this, or even Biscuit Delivery, or you could even go in the Resolve tree for extra health scaling and then maybe Second Wind, because these poke matchups like Orianna, they might constantly hit abilities onto you. If you constantly get hit, Second Wind could be good, but I feel like it's very lane oriented this, and you don't need it if you position properly. So this is by far the best setup in those matchups. There is even another setup that you could go, and this is Phase Rush. Now, I go Phase Rush when I'm going full scaling. Right? when I'm going full scaling, when I have like many champions who want to run me down, who want to get onto me, dash onto me, or flash onto me, phase rush is amazing. And if they have those champions who want to dash onto me or flash onto me, and I'm in a lane where I can't really kill my lane opponent, I just decide to go full scaling. Then I just go phase rush just for mid-game and late-game team fights and to escape from people flashing onto me or running me down, and gathering storm to get extra AP the longer the game goes on, to make sure that my team fights in the mid-game and in the late-game are going to be stronger. So it's full scaling. Again, this is going to be my personal preference, but once again, you could go full scaling even more with Cashback and Cosmic Insight, or Biscuit Delivery and Cosmic Insight, or you could even go one of these here, but I would prefer this setup here for sure. That's it for the phase rush setup. Now, we went over almost all the setups. So here, obviously, we don't have any setups. Here, we don't have any setups. We went over all these 3 setups, which you can all go on Viktor. Here in the resolve tree, I wouldn't go with any. Theoretically, you could sometimes go grasp in melee matchups that you can't really kill. Like, for example, let's say Akali. So you could go grasp, shield bash, and then maybe bone plating, or like into a silence you could go this maybe. But they nerfed it recently, so I don't think it's that good. But you could go something like this, and then secondary, you would go something like this. This is just going to scale you in terms of maximum HP. It's going to help you a little bit in lane. But it's very niche, and you could maybe go it into something like an Irelia or an Akali or a Sylas. But I'm not a big fan of it. Personally, I don't go it, but it is an option. It's an alternative, basically, to the Ares Scorch setup in those melee matchups. But I don't necessarily like it. So then a more viable setup, I would say, or a less niche setup is going to be First Strike. Again, I don't like this setup right now because I don't think First Strike is in a good spot in the current meta. I don't think it's that strong. But it is, like, if it ever becomes strong again, I just want to have covered it. So First Strike is great into melee matchups or into short-range champions where you can consistently hit your opponent before they can hit you, because that way you're going to deal more damage onto them and you're going to get more gold out of this keystone. Now again, it's not that good of a keystone right now, so I wouldn't personally go it. And then on top of that, the other runes in this tree are also not that good. Like, Cashback is the best of these 3, but it's also not that good. Same for Biscuit Delivery, it's the best of these 3, but it's also not that good. And then Cosmic Insight is good, but yeah, in this tree, we have 3 runes that aren't that good right now, and then 1 that's good, so this is a bad setup, you know. And then secondary, you can't really go with the other trees here, even though they're like very, very strong. You can't go with them because, yeah, you need extra mana here. So you're forced to go into sorcery to get mana flow banned. And then, yeah, you're typically just going to go with the Transcendence for the extra ability haste scaling. But this setup doesn't feel that good. You're forced to go into sorcery as a secondary rune tree because you, yeah, go inspiration first tree. And then the first tree here isn't even that good. So you force yourself to only be limited to 1 secondary tree here, while the first tree that makes you be forced to only go with sorcery here is not even that good. So then I would definitely prefer a keystone here in the sorcery tree, because that allows you a lot more freedom. You can choose, do I go resolve, inspiration, or precision? So that's my my thinking about it, my thinking process about it. But I personally, guys, prefer this. So this is my main setup right now in basically 100% of my games. So let's move on to the next part of this guide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about Viktor, his builds. Viktor has many builds. He's a very versatile champion. He works in almost every team comp and against every team comp. So he has many builds that make him versatile. So we're going to have to look at this for quite a bit. First of all, I wrote down here Viktor's viable items. This is just to give you an idea of, like, if you watch this video and in 1 year from now on, you know what is viable on Viktor. I don't think all of these items are right now viable on Viktor. But like in a year from now, you could definitely, like if maybe, for example, Cosmic Drive is not that good right now in the meta. I wouldn't build it on Viktor. But maybe in a year from now, this would be good on Viktor. And then if you're watching this a year from now and Cosmic Drive is in a good spot, you know, okay, I can, the builds that we're going to look at, maybe I can fit a Cosmic Drive in there right now. Right? But all these items are viable on Viktor, just not all of them right now, I would say. With that being said, let's take a look at Viktor, his starting items. Viktor has 3 starting options. So 1, he goes Dorn's Ring with 2 potions. This is the setup that you want to go in 80% of your games, or even more, even 90 or 95% of your games, depending on how consistent you like to be. But Dorn's Ring is great. It gives you and mana regen and ability power, and since you are a lane bully, you need and mana and you need damage and HP, of course. So it's just the best all-round setup you could go, and then you just go it with 2 potions. Additionally, you could also go Sapphire Crystal, and the reason for that is Viktor in the early game, it's a mage, he has mana issues, so he likes to rush Lost Chapter. If you really are in a lane where like there's not much interaction, you can't really bully the lane opponent, like you can't really kill them or bully them and zone them for minutes, and they can't really do the same to you, then I think it's completely fine to go Sapphire Crystal, Available Potion, take Teleport of course, and then just rush to get your Lost Chapter. And I think that's completely fine. Now, why Sapphire Crystal? This just builds into Lost Chapter, and it's the only item here, the only component that gives you mana, so it's the only viable, if you want to rush Lost Chapter, it's the only viable start for an item that you could go. Now, then a last one, tier. I'm not so sure about how viable this is. Honestly, I never go this on Viktor, but I think theoretically it should be viable. Because again, Viktor likes to rush Lost Chapter, he likes to rush mana items, and if you want to rush Archangel Staff, don't worry, we're going to talk about when you should rush that item or when you should go that item. If you want to go that item, then you want to go build tier and you want to stack your tier as quickly as possible. You could do that by picking it as a starting item, again in a lane where you can't really bully the lane opponent or get like an advantage from your range, and they can't really also get an advantage. It's like a stalemate lane. Then it's completely fine to just go Tier of the Goddess here. It's completely fine. But 90% of games, 95% of the games, I just go tiering, honestly. Alright, let's take a look at the first recall items. Again, we want to build Lost Chapter, we want to rush it, so then on your first recall, you typically try to stay in lane as long as possible to get your Lost Chapter. If you can get it, you start dominating your lane opponent. But if you can't get it, if you're forced for some reason to recall quicker, then of course we're just going to start building the components. So the components are obviously these three components, so we're just going to build either Crystal or Amplifying Tone. And if you have enough gold, like 700 gold, we just buy both of them. But I also put Boots here and Dark Seal because I love it. So first of all, I love Boots on Viktor because one, it helps you dodge skill shots in mage matchups, and it helps you to avoid getting all-in or run down yourself melee champions. So I like Boots a lot. Nowadays as well, the boots are so bad in the game that I don't like to rush them, but I do like to rush Boots of Speed here, because that's a little bit of movement speed that you need to get onto people. And then, since I don't rush these boots anyway, it's good to get these ones early. So what I like to do is, I typically, if I don't have enough gold for Lost Chapter, I will just build one component of Lost Chapter and then my boots. So for example, Boots of Speed and a Crystal, or Boots of Speed and Amplifying Tone. But I'm also a very big fan of Dark Seal. It's one of the most gold efficient items in the game, so I really like to pick it up, but you don't necessarily have to build it before you have Lost Chapter. It's completely okay to build Lost Chapter first, and then pick Dark Seal up after you have Lost Chapter. With that being said, let's move on to the possible boots here that you could go on Viktor, and the boots are very straightforward. 90% of the games, you just go Sorcery Shoes. Give you damage, magic penetration, it's all you need. However, sometimes you play into matchups like a Syndra, or maybe even a LeBlanc, right? Just champions like who can just burst you down, and then Mercury Threats might be good in those matchups. Also think of something when they have like a double AP and jungle. So like Syndra mid and Lilia jungle, for example. Then you get a lot of value from building like Mercury Threats, so you could just go Mercury Threats at that point. Now, armor boots, I don't think that they're that viable on Viktor. I almost never go them unless the enemy team is full AD or when they have like 4 auto-attacking champions. And then last but not least, we have Ionian Boots of Lucidity. So these boots give you ability haste. They are right now in the current meta not viable in my opinion, but they were viable and in the future they will potentially become viable again. Why are Ionian Boots kind of broken on, just in general on champions? Because one, in the early game, if you have like a lead as Viktor, Ionian Boots can really make you snowball, and the reason for that is ability haste is super broken in the early game. If you build then ability haste in the early game, it might mean that, for example, your Q cooldown goes from a 7-second cooldown to like a 5-second cooldown. But that same amount of ability haste will only make your Q go from like 3 seconds to 2.6 seconds cooldown in like the later stages of the game. So ability haste is super broken in the early stages of the game. So when you're snowballing, this is a great pickup, but I feel like right now it's only 10 ability haste for 900 gold. And we're right now at the point where if you buy this and you play versus another champion like a Syndra or something who just builds raw AP, you're just going to get out damaged. Or if you compare this to like the serrated Dirk power spike here of 1000 gold, like, yeah, you're not going to be able to compete with these people, right? They're just going to outdamage you because Ionians are right now just not that strong. So I would just go Sorcery Shoes and then sometimes Mercury Threads. Those are the main boots. Now let's take a look at Viktor, his builds. There are quite a lot of builds, and I don't think I've put all the builds even there, but these are the main builds that I want to talk about. So first of all, Luden's Companion. So we have 3 mage items as Viktor. There are 4 Lost Chapter items in the game, and Viktor likes to rush Lost Chapter because he has mana issues. So from these 4 mana items, I feel like there's only 3 items valuable. I don't think right now Malignance is good on Viktor. I've tested it out, and it will only outdamage something like a Luden's Companion, for example, if the enemy team has an insane amount of magic resist and is quite tanky. And even then, if you constantly poke people, Luden's Companion is still going to outdamage Malignance, so I would say Malignance is right now not a good option for Viktor. So that leaves us with 3 other items: Blackfire Torch, Archangel Staff, and Luden's Companions. These 3 items are always going to be our first item because we want to rush Luden's Companion, and then the rest of our build is going to, we're going to fill the build up starting from that point. So let's start with the first Lost Chapter item, Luden's Companion. In 80% of your games, you're going to want to go with Luden's Companion. It's just the most consistent high damage dealing Lost Chapter item. It deals an insane amount of damage. It gives you 100 AP. It gives you great poke with the passive. So yeah, it's just great poke damage, great damage overall. It's an amazing item. Secondary, if you play versus like squishies, like many low maximum HP champions, you can go with Shadow Flame and you will deal an insane amount of damage. Now at that point, we already have a lot of damage. We could just go into Zhonya's. But let me say something about these last 3 items. Viktor, typically, like almost every mage in the game, wants to have and Void Staff and Deathcap in their build at some point. So these items are locked. You need to get them at some point. But Viktor is so immobile, where like most immobile mages at some point are going to want to build a Zhonya's. Or maybe a Banshees, but they're going to want to build some point of sustain item in their build. So for now, let's say it's just Zhonya's. So then these 3 items, in what order you build them, I don't really care. It's more you have to build them. So you can really only choose your first 2 items. These 3 items are typically just locked. So typically what I like to do when I'm snowballing and I'm going this build into squishies, I like to go Deathcap 3rd item. And then depending on whether I need magic resist, I go Void. If not, I just build the Zhonya's. It's always useful on Viktor. But this is going to be the standard build. Now, why do I like Deathcap as a 3rd item typically? Well, an average game in all the elos, it typically lasts like 30 minutes, right? Like somewhere around that. It varies on elo, but it's typically around 30 minutes. Now, in order for you to like unlock these 3 items, it will typically take around like somewhere like, depending on how fat you are, but like let's say 24 to 30 minutes. So if you want to have your Deathcap power spike consistently in your games, you're going to have to build it as a 3rd item. And yeah, I just like that. So that's what I do. But if you need Zhonya's early on, if they have like a Zed or a Fizz, you could just build Zhonya's earlier, build it like this or build it like this. That's completely fine. Okay, but with that being said, so I'm going to just put it like this right now. Let's take a look at the next build. And this build is going to be the exact same build, except for 1 item change. Again, we're going to look at these 2 items here because these items are typically locked. We're going to swap out Shadow Flame for Lich Bane. Now, Shadow Flame typically outperforms Lich Bane, it just deals that much damage. But if you play versus many melee champions and they're like quite tanky, like you can't just blow them up. Think of something like a Yasuo, right? Yasuo, Yarn, very annoying. They are melee, but they're still relatively tanky, you know? Like they still are not that easy to kill. They're still not a one tap. So then if they're melee, you can get in a lot of your Q empowered auto attacks in onto them. So, and because they don't die, you're typically going to get like 3-4 Qs onto them in a fight. So then using Lich Bane is great because the empowered damage on the auto attack is actually going to outdamage Lich Bane in these fights. So if you play versus more bruiser type champions or tanky champions, I think Lich Bane is an amazing item because you're going to get in a lot of your Q empowered auto in, and that's going to deal a lot of damage onto the enemies. And then again, for these last 3 items, they're just locked. Again, the skill order is not necessarily always this, but these 3 items, you typically just want to pick them up in your build at some point. All right, then we go to another build, and I think this one is also completely fine. And this one is very similar to the Lich Bane build. It's more similar to the Lich Bane build than it is to the Shadow Flame build. And the reason for that is we're also going to go the same build, but now we're going to swap out Lich Bane for Liandry's. Lichbane, we go into tanky, bruisey team comps, where they are a lot of melee champions, because we can get in a lot of apart auto attack. We can fight for a long time. This here is the same. We're going to play versus like tanks. Liandry's is going to be very good because we're going to do maximum HP damage. It's going to be very good against very high HP stacking champions. So think of champions like a Ryze who like to go Rod of Ages, or a Cho'Gath or a Sion is very good against those type of champions. So while Lichbane would be good in those champions also into like a Sion, because you will get off many auto attacks, it cannot compete with the maximum HP damage from a Liandry's, because the Sions and Cho'Gaths, they stack so much HP that the damage you get from this will be insane compared to a Lichbane. So Lichbane is more when they have like relatively bruiser type champions, like not that tanky champions, but just like a Yasuo, for example, is really good into those like relatively hard to kill champions in like one combo, so you can just go Lichbane. But if they have like real tank champions who stack HP, you typically want to go with the Liandry. You're going to see a lot more success with that. Alright, and then again, the next 3 items are just going to be the same. So let's take a look at the next build. Now this build, you might think, okay, what is this? What of a disgrace is this? Well, I've actually experimented with this a lot, and I think it's really strong right now. You don't need to go Riftmaker, you could go Zhonya's, you could go other items, but the main gist here is that right now our mana item is going to change. We're not going to go Luden's Companion, we're going to go here, Blackfire Torch. That's going to be our Lost Chapter item that we're going to rush. When do you want to rush this? Well, typically I want to go Blackfire Torch if the enemy is very tanky, and if they have very much, like a lot of melee champions. Now, why is that? Well, it's very simple. Let's take a look at Blackfire Torch, what it does. Damaging abilities deal bonus magic damage for 3 seconds. So it has a burn effect. So this is going to be great on, like, if you can constantly attack enemies, the burn effect is constantly going to refresh. So it's great on tankier champions. That's 1. 2, Blackfire. For each enemy champion, epic and large monster affected by your Baleful Blaze gain 4% ability power. So this is very simple again. If they have a lot of melees, it's very easy to just constantly hit them and constantly stack this to get like your extra 4% ability power here. If they have many ranged champions who are constantly kiting, it might be difficult to constantly hit people and make sure that you can stack this properly. So this is great into tanky bruiser team comps with many melee champions. So, for example, a Set top lane within a Mumu jungle, a Leona support, Galio mid lane, like those comps, Blackfire Torch is amazing. And then obviously you also want to go Liandry's. Again, you want to go Blackfire Torch to have many melees and also like tankier champions because the burn is very good in tanky champions. And then Liandry's, it's max half HP, so of course you want to go this in tanks as well. So typically when you want to go Blackfire Torch, you also want to go Liandry's, because those items have somewhat of a similar idea behind them. Not completely, but somewhat similar. And then Riftmaker is going to be amazing as well. And hear me out here, because you could also go just instant into Deathcap, power, like Spike Heart, and that's probably what I would suggest. But I would go Riftmaker, for example, as a 4th item. I would definitely do it. Now the reason for it is very simple. Riftmaker, so let's take a look at it. For each second in combat with an enemy champion, deal bonus damage at maximum strength, gain Omnivamp as well. The Omnivamp doesn't matter that much on Viktor, but you will gain extra strength. So what's an Void Infusion, gain 2% of your bonus health as ability power. So that's not super useful, but what is useful is the extra damage in a team fight. And it also makes us tankier 1, so we get like, from this item we get HP, from this item we get HP, so Liandry is 300, 350 from Riftmaker, so we are becoming extra, like really tanky. So even the bonus health here, we're gonna have a lot of bonus health, so we're even gonna deal a lot of damage with the Void Infusion alone already, so it's actually not that bad. But the main part is the extra damage that we get the longer we are in a fight. Well, guess what, guys? Riftmaker passive is not that easy to keep it up, to constantly make sure that it doesn't go away. But if you have Liandry's and Blackfire Torch, so the burn, whether you go Liandry's or Blackfire Torch or a combination of them, both of these items will leave a burn onto the enemies for 3 seconds. Well, guess what? Those 3 seconds of burn, they constantly refresh and keep up your Riftmaker. So I'm not a big fan of Riftmaker in League, but if you are building a Liandry's and Blackfire Torch, I think Riftmaker is actually pretty good, because 1, Liandry's gives you HP, which makes you do more damage with the Void Infusion of Riftmaker. And the burn makes sure that your Riftmaker passive constantly stays active, so you all constantly have that extra damage. And if you combine it with the extra damage that you gain from the Blackfire here of the Blackfire Torch, it's going to be very insane how much consistent damage you deal, specifically with Liandry's as well. So this build has a lot of synergies, so I think it's an amazing build into very tanky team comps with many melee champions. Now, let's take a look at another build. So another build is, and I think this is one of the last builds we're going to go over. Are there other combinations? Yes, I'm sure you could go other combinations for sure, but these are the main builds 100%. And this is going to be the last main build that we're going to look at. If we are playing versus tanky bruiser team comps, but we do want to, for example, like, let's think of Amumu. Right? You're playing versus Amumu. What is Amumu? He's a tank, right? So Liandry's is going to deal a lot of damage into him because Amumu is a tank. He likes to stack HP. Liandry's does max HP damage, so we're going to deal a lot of damage. Now, what's also important is Amumu likes to engage onto us. He likes to engage onto us and look to all-in us, ult us, things like that. Archangels is going to help you both with, one, getting through tanky champions. Like, you're going to need a lot of mana if you want to constantly attack like tanky champions. This is going to give you a lot of mana to do that. Additionally, Archangel stuff is going to give you a shield, which is amazing. It's going to give you a very big shield if you get below a certain threshold of HP. This is great for when you play versus team comps with many champions who like to go onto you, who like to collapse onto you. Like, even against assassins, this is a great item. So specifically, Liandry's Archangels combo gives you a lot of HP, right? Like 300 HP with the Liandry's, and then also like a lot of mana here with the Archangels Lost Chapter item, and also just it's Archangels, so you're going to get a lot of mana. And then if you combine the HP that you get from Liandry's and the HP that you get from the shield of Archangel stuff, you become quite unkillable. So if you play versus champions who really like to dash onto you, or like assassins who like to really kill you, I think Archangels with Zhonya's is a great option. And then typically, like champions who like to dash onto you are typically also champions who are a little bit more bruisery, like a Renekton or an Amumu or a Hecarim. And then Liandry's is also going to be a great item into those comps, so that's why this is such a great synergy. And then here, again, you finish off the build with a Deathcap and a Void Staff. Are there currently other builds available? Yes, I'm pretty sure you can mix these in, but I think these are the main builds on Viktor. There's not too much to say about this. There's a lot, right? There's a lot that we talked about, but these are the main builds. You have other setups maybe, but I don't think they're going to be that good. These are the main optimal builds for Viktor, and these two here are the ones that I run like 90% of my game. So the Ludens builds, I think they're the best builds so far. And then if they have many melees, I just go this. If they don't, if they have just squishies, but not necessarily like many melees where I'm going to get a lot of powered auto attacks in, I'm just going to go with Shadow Flame. And then these other ones, we explained it, why you might want to use those builds, but these are the main two ones. That's it for the builds, guys. Finally, let us move on to the next part of this guide. Alright guys, let's take a look at Viktor, his ability combos. Now, I don't think Viktor has traditional combos in the sense that like you want to do always the same combo in a team fight in every single game. I don't think that's true. Viktor is much more of a champion who likes to poke people and kite people once he has his upgraded Q, and try to deal as much DPS as possible by just doing those Qs and Es when they are on cooldown. Now, typically, we're going to just start right off the beginning and see what we can do with his abilities, because there are still things you need to know about his abilities. First of all, his Q. At level 1, typically that's the ability that you level. It's one of the strongest abilities in the game at level 1. You can damage your opponent twice and you gain a shield. It's ridiculous. But there is a specific way you want to do your Q, because if you do Q auto, you're going to have to wait a very long time for this auto. So Q auto, look how long it takes after the Q before you do the auto. So Q auto takes a very long time. So you want to speed up this process. You want to do the auto attack quicker than when we did it right now. There's multiple options for that. There's really multiple options. So first of all, we could do Q, walk up, then auto, and it's also going to cancel the animation. So let me show you. So Q walk, auto attack, and it cancels the animation. It's a lot quicker right now. But it's a bit difficult because you have to, Q onto your opponent, you have to walk forward and then do the auto attack. So it's a little bit, right? You might want to practice this. There is an easier way. There are two easier ways, in fact. You could also just Q your opponent, and rather than just auto-attacking it once, you can auto-attack it twice. So Q auto-attack goes off a lot quicker than just Q auto-attack. So look at the difference. Q auto-attack, slow, and now Q auto-attack, a lot quicker. Now, you don't necessarily, so many people don't know this, but you can, the issue is not with the one auto-attack. So if you do Q auto-attack, It isn't slow because you only press auto attack once. So if you do Q auto auto, so this is Q auto, so slow, and then this is fast, Q auto auto. People think the difference is that you do 2 auto attacks and that makes it faster. Not necessarily. You can also get it this fast with 1 auto attack, but it's your timing on the ability. So for example, if I instantly press auto on the dummy after I just press Q, if I instantly press auto, my auto attack gets input buffered. And that's why it's so slow. It's first going to fully finish off the Q animation and then the auto attack. Whereas if I wait until the Q hits and then do the auto, then click auto on the champion, it's also going to be quick just with 1 auto attack. So look. This was also quick, only with 1 auto attack. So many people think you have to spam click your target or you have to move to cancel it. Not necessarily. You can just do Q, auto, wait until the Q gets there, and it also goes off quickly. So the second part that you want to do, typically level 2, you unlock your E, and it's very simple. What do you do with your E? You just poke your opponent. You just poke your opponent. It's very simple. Right? Now your E costs a lot of mana, so typically you want to push the wave and hit your opponent at the same time. Or if the wave is pushing towards you and you don't want to hit the wave too much, you just want to last hit minions and hit your opponent at the same time as well. But typically what you want to do with your E is just, you hit it, right? There's not really a combo with it. We just look to hit it onto our opponent, and that's typically the lane. If they overstep too much, we can do a Q, remember? So Q auto, or Q auto auto, whatever you prefer. Or maybe Q move auto, it's whatever you prefer, but I prefer Q and then do the auto, so Q auto. Maybe you move, it depends on whether you need to run them down or not. But that's typically what you do, and then if they are far, if they're out of your Q range, you typically just look to E them, right? You typically just look to E them, and that's completely fine. You can also sometimes do QE, so if you walk up, I wouldn't typically walk up if I only have Q. I would typically walk up if I have Q and E. Because if I only have Q at level 2, 3, 4, people might actually outtrade me. So then what you want to do, and this is a little bit maybe difficult, you want to Q, E, and then do the auto attack. So if you have both Q and E up and you want to walk up at like level 2, or level 3, or level 4, I recommend that you QE auto attack. Because you can cast your E while you do your Q. So take a look at this. So QE, you can cast them at the same time. So QE, you see both of them are in the air. Like the Q is in the air and the E is releasing. So you can do both at the same time. So it's very difficult to do like Q auto attack and then E. Like it's best if you just do QE auto attack. That's the best combo. So if they ever overstep and you walk in range and you have Q and E, very simple. You walk up, QE auto attack. Right? And that's a combo that you do for the quickest burst onto them. But then again, that is great from a theoretical point of view in terms of like combos and in terms of getting your damage off as quickly as possible. But even in high, elo, and Grandmaster games, I would never use this almost. Okay, like what's the use case of it? Typically, you want to not use your Q only for burst, but you need to shield. So typically what's going to happen is you're going to walk up, you're going to wait until they do an ability because you don't want to do Q. They keep their abilities, and then when your shield is over, that's when they all in you. No. You want to... They overextend, so you walk up, and now because you walk up, they might throw an ability at you. You wait until they do the ability, and then typically that's when you Q, and then do the QE auto attack. For example, that's when you do the shield, QE auto attack. That's when you could do this combo. But even then, it might not be that ideal. Even then, you might want to just do Q auto, and then when they walk away, maybe hit them and the wave at the same time, because again, you typically don't want to just use your E on the opponent, and it's very difficult to do QE auto, hit them, and hit the wave at the same time with your E. That's going to be very difficult. So typically it's just better to just walk up, we do the Q, and now when they walk away, look to hit them and the wave at the same time. For example, like this. If they stand here, and here's the wave, maybe just like this. So very often you're going to not do your Q and E at the same time. You're just going to do it separately to get the most value out of both. Then with your W, yeah, your W also, we could talk about combos like doing WQE auto attack. So WQE auto attack. We could talk about those combos, but again, there's not that much value from it. Because typically it all depends on like, if you do W, are you going to hit them? Are they slowed? Maybe you wait until they're stunned and then you would do your E. Then you would do QE auto, for example. It wouldn't make sense to instantly do WQE, because if you W, you know they're about to get stunned. So why not wait to hit your E on the stun target? It's a free hit. So I would wait, I would do W, wait until the target is stunned, and then QE auto. That's what I would do. Then the QE auto combo is actually a good combo if they are already stunned, if they can't trade back with you. So again, it's not really a combo, you know. And then with ultimate, again, what do you typically want to do? Well, you can just like typically in lane, what happens? You poke them down, they get low. And now if they overstep once, you just try to run them down. For example, you do QR and you just run them down. So not a lot of combos here with Viktor. However, what you can do, like sometimes they walk into you or they dash into you like in a Kali. She R1s into you and then she has to wait like a little bit for her R2. While she's on you, you could then try to do your W to stun her and do your full combo. In that situation, it could be useful to know that you can input buffer your R before your W. So if you plan on doing W and then R, you might as well do RW because your ultimate is going to pop earlier. So I'm going to show you guys. So I'm going to do WR really quick. So WR, look how long it takes for my ultimate. It gets input buffered for how long it takes to be on the ground, like to hit this guy. Now let's do it differently. I'm going to do RW. RW, my ultimate is instantly there. My W is also quicker on the ground and it goes off better. But again, doing your RW, input buffering your R only makes sense if you know your W is going to stun the target. So if you know somebody dashes onto you and now they don't have anything to escape, they don't have flash, they don't have dashes, that's when you could do, for example, on yourself, RW, and that could be a great combo. As Viktor, what you typically want to do is you want to stand behind your dummies, behind your team dummies, like your teammates, like the tanky teammates, and then you just look to poke enemies from a distance, right? If they walk up a little bit too far, or your teammate walks up here, like an Ornn, he walks up for you, maybe you can get like in a Q auto attack in, but typically just E, maybe R, and then run them down when your teammates stand in front of you, things like that. So that's typically what you're going to do on Viktor, not too many combos here. But that's basically the main gist of Viktor, what you can do, like the animation cancels and what you can do with his combos. Now, something that might also be important to know is that you can input buffer every ability before flash. So you don't have to flash and then Q, for example. You don't have to do it. You can also do Q flash. So it cancels the Q animation because it's input buffered. So look, if I want to go into this guy, but he's not in Q range, rather than flash Q, this, you can just Q flash. So Q flash. Now, if you do the Q flash onto your opponent, I would say you could obviously, again, you could do, so you Q flash, and you could wait until the Q hits to do the auto attack to make sure it's quick. But in this scenario, to make it easy, because you flash anyway into your opponent's range, I would make sure that you just spam click the auto attack after you do the Q to make sure the empowered auto attack is cancelled. So very simple. I would literally just Q flash and then spam auto attack to make sure it goes off quickly. Now you can also do this with your W. So again, if you flash W, look, it doesn't go off that quickly. Right? It's a little bit slow. So again, I'm going to show you once. It's a little bit slow. If I do W flash, so let me see, it goes off a little bit quicker. So W flash feels a bit smoother. It's not a big difference, but this is W flash, and then flash W is going to be this. So I feel like it's even very slight. I don't even know if there's like a big difference. I feel like it's a little bit of a difference, but it's not that big. So you could flash W. It's not that big of a problem. So yeah, this is W flash W. So it's not that big of a difference. So you could also just flash W. At this point, we're just nitpicking. All right. So now about your E, something that I don't know people say, but I don't really like this is that you could E flash. So you could, for example, you could try to E this guy and then flash. So let me show you. So this guy is not in range, so you could E flash, but the problem is your E doesn't extend. So people say, hey, you can E flash to cancel the animation and to make it smoother, but there's no point typically. Unless you want to surprise your enemy, there's no point, because if the E range doesn't get extended by E flashing, that means that whether you E flash or you don't, the enemy is going to be in range even without flashing. So there's no point in E flashing unless you want to surprise your opponent. However, what you can do is flash E to extend your range. So if your opponent right now, like here, he's going to be slightly not in range. So, and walk back a little bit. So here it's going to be not in range if I do this. But of course, I could flash and then E, and of course, then I would be in range. So flash E makes a lot more sense than E flashing. And then with ultimate, yes, here it makes sense to R flash, because look, if I do flash R, it's a little bit slow. It's a little bit slow. If I'm going to do R flash, so I'm going to press R onto onto the target here. So R flash, it goes off a lot quicker. So R flash is a cancellation. With your E, it doesn't make sense in my opinion, and but with your Q and with your R, it makes sense. So it goes off a lot quicker if you R flash rather than if you flash R. The same for your Q. Q goes off a lot quicker when you flash. when you do Q flash, so Q flash, and when you would flash Q, but for E it doesn't make sense in my opinion, and W you almost don't see the difference if there is a difference at all, so there you can do whatever you want. But that's it about Viktor combos and cancellations and all that stuff. I don't think it's that beneficial to try and make up other combos because frankly you typically don't use them. Your job is literally in team fights to sit behind your teammates and poke enemies. That's your job. And if you're ever in a situation where people are flanking or where people are walking at you and you do want to kill them, again, it's very simple. We do the RW, right? The RW, and then we follow up with QE auto attack. We do that after each other, and that's when we just want them. But typically that's not what you want to do on Viktor anyway. So typically you just want to E and Q people to deal as much DPS as possible. So there's not that much combo. Alright, that's it for Viktor combos, if you can call it that. Now, let's move on to the next part of this guide. Now, let's talk about Viktor's game plan. So, starting in the lane phase, if you play Viktor versus melee champions, you're mainly looking to slow push the wave and poke the enemies while you're slow pushing. Your goal is to get them as low as possible, and after the wave finally crashes under their turret, let it bounce back towards your side of the lane and look to set up a freeze. This freeze will build your initial lead that allows you to start snowballing the game. However, keep in mind there are exceptions to this. For example, against a Yasuo or an Irelia, I wouldn't push into them. I would let them push into me and instantly set up a freeze. If that's possible, of course. As these champions, they are just ridiculously strong at level 2. So you can't afford to be on their side of the lane once they hit level 2 or they will just run you down. So be aware of slow pushing into melee champions who spike very hard at level 2, like Yasuo or an Irelia. However, if you play Viktor into a ranged matchup like Syndra for example, you're playing ranged versus ranged. So look to push faster than your opponent so that they always need to make decisions. By pushing first and pushing quicker, they always have to make the decision of do they let the wave crash under their turret and hit you with their abilities, or do they hit the wave with their abilities but now you can trade onto them for free as they have no abilities left to trade back. Now range versus range matchups are typically all about this pushing and creating prio in your lane. Now, generally speaking, whether you're playing versus a melee champion or a ranged champion, your main focus in the early game should always be to farm all the minions in the lane. However, in order to be in a position where you can always walk up to farm minions, you typically have to outtrade your opponent. Therefore, I recommend that at level 1 you level your Q and look to aggressively trade with your opponent, as most mid laners simply cannot compete with Viktor's Q. Once you hit level 2, you can put a point in your E and look to poke your opponent down. However, keep in mind your Q costs a lot less mana than your E, so whenever you can trade with Q, look to do that. But of course, if you do decide to use your E, make sure that you get the maximum value out of it because it costs so much mana. So if you want to push the wave, look to hit the wave and your opponent at the same time. Now if you want to freeze, look to last hit minions and hit your opponent at the same time. Now farming is important on Viktor because of his passive, but it's also important that you farm really well on the first couple of waves so that you can potentially buy a lost chapter on your first recall, teleport back to lane, and then spam your opponent with abilities. Lost chapter is one of Viktor's greatest power spikes, but that also means that if enemies can force you to recall before you can buy it, you might be in a tough position. So don't overstep and take bad trades in the early stages of the game, as you need to be healthy and have enough mana to lane long enough until you have the gold for your lost chapter. Getting lost chapter on your first recall is absolutely insane. Now let's take a look at Viktor's game plan from level 6 to the mid game. Well, frankly, this stage of the game for Viktor is a bit of an awkward one, as most champions have an easier time fighting you once you're level 6 than before you're level 6. That's because pre-level 6, you just win most matchups, but once enemies unlock their ultimate, like a Yone ultimate or an Akali ultimate or even a Syndra ultimate, it becomes a lot more difficult to position properly and not die. Most matchups become a lot harder for Viktor in this stage of the game. And that's not because you can't kill them. It's because now that they are also level 6, they can also kill you, which they typically cannot do before they're level 6. Now this means that if they can typically kill you, we're gonna play a little bit more safe, so we're mainly gonna focus on farming and not dying, but of course we also have to make sure that while we live and scale, the enemies don't outroam us, so we typically have to pressure them a lot by pushing waves for example, or just taking aggressive trades whenever you can, to make sure that while we're scaling and playing safe, they cannot outroam you or out-impact you on the map. That's it for the lane phase game plan. Now let's take a look at Viktor's mid and late game game plan. Typically around 15 minutes in the game, you look to start side laning as your bot lane will move to the mid lane. If that's the case, go to the side lane and soak solo gold and XP. Viktor is great at pushing waves, but he's not necessarily good at taking turrets, and he's also very immobile. So side laning is typically one of Viktor's weaknesses, especially when he needs to side lane versus champions like Akali or Irelia, or versus enemy junglers like a Zac or a Rengar. So typically as Viktor, look to shove out the waves as far as possible, ideally make the wave crash under the enemy turret, and once that's done, look to move to your team and help them get prio to take objectives or win fights. And then just repeat this process over and over again. Now, when you're really strong, and let's say you just completed an item and you have your ultimate and you have your flash available, you can even skip the side lane, you can instantly go mid lane with your team and force a mid lane fight. Now, you should win the fight because you're this strong, because that's the reason why we started the mid lane fight and skipped the side lane, because we're very strong, we're strong enough to just win a fight. So once you've won the fight, you can look to take turrets, enemy jungle camps, and once you've done all of that, go back to the side lane while you're waiting for your ultimate and flash to come up again, and while you're waiting for your next item, farm a little bit. Once you're strong again, look to go mid lane again. Now, the most important part of Viktor's mid and late game plan is the objective team fights. As Viktor, you need to be present at every important objective team fight, as that's literally what your champion is designed for. Your goal is to prepare dragons and barons properly by recalling at least 1 minute beforehand so you can spend all your gold and preferably pick up a control ward and a blue trinket before the fight. Now, in these objective team fights, your main job is dealing as much damage per second, so you need to deal DPS. Let your teammates spew you by standing in front of you and look to deal damage to the enemy team from the backline. Now here's a great tip, make sure to activate your ultimate when you have a teammate that can peel you so that you can walk up and make your ultimate as fast as possible, because remember, the closer you stand to your ultimate, the quicker it moves. And last but not least, Viktor is also great at zoning enemies from entering a dragon or a baron pit by placing his W in spots where he can hold up the entire enemy team. So also don't forget to actively look for zoning angles, as that might give you an objective for free without even having to fight for it, because the enemies can literally not enter the dragon or the baron pit. Now that's it for the mid and late game plan. Now let's move on to the next part of this guide. Okay, so we've arrived at the matchup tier list. Now, just like in all my other champion guides, let me say that I don't think matchup tier lists are that useful because they depend so much on various factors like your rank, the enemy jungle setup, your jungle setup, etc. And because of that, I basically don't really enjoy making matchup tier lists. I don't see the use case of it, but I know many people like matchup tier lists, so here is one, but please take it with a grain of salt. Because for example, Veigar is a champion that is really easy to play against as Viktor, but he has great jungle setup for when he has a ganking jungler like a Sejuani or a Shaco. And then suddenly this matchup becomes a lot more difficult. So once again, with that being said, take this matchup tier list with a grain of salt. The main gist of this tier list is that typically champions who are very mobile and want to get onto you like most assassins are gonna be difficult for you, whereas short-ranged immobile champions are great for Viktor. With that being said, let's take a look at Viktor's specific synergies. First of all, Viktor struggles versus mobile champions, both in the mid lane, but also in the other roles. Think of champions like Akali and Fizz, but also supports for example like Pyke and Rakan, who like to roam and get onto you, or even top laners like Camille or Irelia. Additionally, Viktor also struggles versus ganking junglers with big gap closers like a Rek'Sai, a Jarvan, or the worst one in my opinion, Zac. Now, on the other side of the coin, Viktor performs well if he has some frontline on his team. So think of champions like an Ornn or a Raul who can form a great frontline for Viktor and make him safe in teamfights. And of course, since Viktor struggles versus mobile champions, he performs well versus immobile and low range champions like a Cassiopeia or a Ryze. Alright guys, I'm gonna do a quick Viktor skin tier list here. It is subjective, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it, but I do want to talk about it because I first of all want to say Viktor doesn't have any bad skins. At least not smoothness wise. I think, yeah, there are some skins that don't look that good, but smoothness wise, I think all of his skins are very much playable in game. They are quite smooth, including the standard skin, so you should be fine in that regard. Now let's start with the basic skin. I will just put it in A tier. It's a good point of reference, and yeah, the skin is just, there's not much to it, but it is smooth and it looks pretty decent, so I'll put it in A tier. Prototype Viktor, yeah, I don't like how it looks, so I'm just gonna put it in this category. I'm just gonna leave it here where it is. I don't like how it looks. This category is made for this skin. Yeah, it's too old. I think the skin idea, the skin concept could be great, but it's too old looking in game. It hasn't aged too well, and I don't like how it currently is. They definitely need to fix it, and it could be great skin if they update it. Then we have here, I think it's called Creator Viktor. It's an amazing skin. It looks really good in game, and the splash art looks very nice with the red laser. And then when you go into game, I feel like it's very much the same. So I like it when a skin is not just cool on the splash art and then sucks in game. Like it's both crazy nice on the splash art and in game. So I really much like it. Then High Noon, yeah, this is going to be a bit of a controversial one. So smoothness wise, this is probably his smoothest skin or one of his smoothest skins. And I could place it in S+++. The reason why I'm going to put it in A tier is because it's too much for me. Like it's too much of the same, the color scheme. It's a High Noon skin, yet it's completely silver gray-ish. Like literally everything, like his costume, his staff, his lightning, like his E-laser, his Q, everything is the same color. And I don't like it. It's too much of the same. So I'm going to put it in A tier here, even though the skin is very, very smooth. PsyOps Viktor, I'm going to put it in S tier. I'm not super much of a fan of how the character looks, but the sounds on this skin are amazing. One, it's super, super smooth, and the sounds on the skin are amazing. The E and the ultimate, yeah, it has a very nice chromatic sound to it. I just love it. I just love it. So I put it in S tier. This Sworn Viktor, yeah, the skin it's probably S++. Like, it's really, really good. It looks good in game, I feel like. It really has that, like, the way it looks on the splash art, that's exactly how it feels when you play it in game. The effects look really, really nice. Yeah, this is definitely an S+++ skin. And then last but not least, this is typically my favorite skin, so maybe I'll put it here as first in the S+++ tier. I like it the most. This skin here, yeah, it's just my favorite. When you go in game, it has like these yellow greenish effects. I love it. The way he walks, I love it. The armor, I absolutely love it. It's just an amazing skin. Now, I think this skin has much hate actually in the Viktor community, but I think if you're a main Viktor and you've played him a long time, I think most people would actually put this skin in S+++ tier. And then, yeah, people who don't play it that much, they might just put it like all the way here. But I absolutely love it. Both the smoothness of it and also like the effects in game, like the aesthetic. But that's it, guys, for our skin tier list here. That's the end of the video. We went over many, many things. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, make sure to leave some comments in the comment section down below with some suggestions for future guides or future videos. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being here. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video.